In the age of great explorers, two magnificent galleons set sail from the same port, heading into the unknown currents of the Southern Ocean. The first ship, the Invincible, was built for speed and luxury. Its hull was one vast open space to hold as much treasure as possible. The captain boasted that his ship was the fastest in the fleet because it carried no extra weight. "Why waste space on heavy internal walls?" he laughed. "A good captain simply avoids the rocks." The second ship, the Guardian, was slower and looked cluttered. Its hull was divided into 12 independent, watertight compartments. If one section was pierced by a rock, the water would be trapped in that single bulkhead, allowing the rest of the ship to stay afloat. During a massive midnight storm, both ships struck a hidden reef. The Invincible took a single hit to its midsection, water rushed into the open hull, and within 10 minutes the entire ship was on the ocean floor. The Guardian took 2 hits, but the water was contained. The crew stayed calm, pumped out the small leak, and sailed back to port for repairs. Your life is the ship. Most people build their lives like the Invincible: one job, one skill, one source of truth. It works perfectly when the sea is calm, but the moment the iceberg of an economic crash or a company layoff hits, the whole structure sinks because there are no bulkheads. A shock absorber isn't a lack of faith in your success, it is a mechanical necessity for long-term survival. If your main income fails today, do you have a watertight compartment to keep your family afloat while you fix the leak? Or are you sailing an open hull, praying the sea stays flat forever? Marcus was a senior vice president of global strategy at a massive conglomerate. He had a corner office, a company car, and a salary that allowed him to live in a mansion. He spent his days in meetings, moving digital numbers across spreadsheets and giving speeches about synergy. He was the king of his castle. But Marcus had a secret. He hadn't actually produced a tangible result with his own hands in 15 years. He didn't know how to sell a product, he didn't know how to write code, and he didn't know how to build a business from scratch. He was an expert at being an executive within that specific company. One Monday morning, the conglomerate was bought by a rival firm. By Monday afternoon, Marcus's security badge didn't work. He sat in his mansion, looking at his expensive watch, and realized he was terrified. He had golden handcuffs. He had become so dependent on the platform's infrastructure that he had forgotten how to survive without it. When he went to job interviews, he realized that other companies didn't want a strategy expert who only knew how to navigate one specific corporate culture. They wanted people who could solve problems. He had plenty of status, but zero shock absorbers. Status is a borrowed light. Your skills are your own sun. If your entire value is tied to your job title, you are a prisoner of that title. The man who earns less but knows how to grow food, fix an engine, or sell a service directly to a customer is far safer than the executive who only knows how to attend meetings. Your last trump card is the ability to walk away from any building and still be able to earn a living the next day. Don't let the comfort of a high-paying cage trick you into thinking you are free. True freedom is the skill set that travels with you when the badge stops working. In a mountain village, there was a young man named Elias who drove a sturdy truck to transport goods between the peak and the valley. The road was treacherous. Sharp rocks, sudden mudslides, and steep drops were the norm. Elias prided himself on his maintenance. His engine roared with health, and his cargo was always secure. One morning, his friend Julian noticed Elias spent an hour every weekend checking a heavy, dusty wheel bolted to the underside of the truck. "Why waste your time on that dead weight, Elias?" Julian laughed. "Your tires are new, the weather is clear, and that extra weight is just burning more fuel. You're preparing for a failure that hasn't happened in 3 years." Julian didn't believe in dead weight. He used the space under his own truck to carry extra luxury goods to sell for a higher profit. He was the fastest and most profitable driver for months. Then came the night of the shattered stone. A small rock slide had scattered razor-sharp flint across the pass. Both trucks hit the debris. Julian's front tire exploded. He sat in the dark, miles from help, with a truck full of expensive silk but no way to move. He lost his contract, his reputation, and eventually his truck to the debt collectors. Elias also hit the flint and blew a tire, but within 20 minutes he had swapped it for his dead weight spare. He arrived at the market only slightly late. The spare tire is not a sign of weakness or a lack of confidence, it is the insurance policy for your continuity. Most people view a side hustle or a backup skill as something you only need when you are failing. In reality, you build the spare while your main tires are perfect. You don't wait for the puncture to learn how to change the wheel. If your entire life depends on one tire, one job, one client, one industry, you aren't a driver. You're a victim waiting for a sharp rock. A backup plan isn't a distraction from your main goal. It is the reason you actually reach it. In the Golden Valley, the harvest of 24 was the greatest in a century. The wheat was so thick it looked like a sea of gold. A farmer named Silas saw this mountain of grain and felt like a king. He decided that life was too short for the dusty labor of farming. He sold 3/4 of his harvest and bought fine silk robes, imported wines and hired musicians to play in his courtyard every night. "The earth is generous," he shouted to his neighbors. "Why hoard seeds like a rat when we can live like lions?" He mocked the old farmer next door, Caleb, who was busy building a second, thicker stone granary to store every extra grain he could save. Then came the great drought of 25. For 18 months the sky was like polished brass. Not a single drop of rain fell. The Golden Valley turned into a dust bowl. Silas's wine ran out in 3 months. His silk robes grew tattered, and he couldn't eat his expensive music. He tried to sell his luxuries back, but in a famine, a diamond isn't worth a handful of oats. He begged at Caleb's door. Caleb opened his heavy stone granary. Inside, the air was cool and smelled of dry grain. He had enough to feed his family and still have seeds left for the next planting. Caleb hadn't lived better than Silas during the good year, but he lived longer during the bad one. Cash flow is the oxygen of your survival. In the years of plenty, when the markets are up and the commissions are high, most people expand their lifestyle to match their peak earnings. They trade their security for status symbols that have zero value in a crisis. But the economy, like the weather, is cyclical. A surplus is not a signal to spend, it is a mandate to store. If you don't build your granary when the sun is shining, you will be forced to sell your soul when the rain stops. Survival isn't about how much you make at the peak, it's about how much you keep for the valley. On the edge of a high cliff stood 2 trees, a magnificent poplar and a gnarled, low-growing juniper. The poplar grew with incredible speed, reaching its branches toward the clouds in just a few seasons. It was the tallest thing for miles, visible from the distant sea. Its leaves shimmered in the light, and it looked down upon the juniper, which spent most of its energy pushing its roots deep into the cracks of the granite rock rather than growing tall. "You are so small and hidden," the poplar whispered. "Look at me, I touch the sky while you stay in the dirt." One autumn, a Category 5 hurricane tore through the coast. The wind was so fierce it could strip the paint off a house. The poplar, with its massive height and wide canopy, acted like a giant sail. It caught the full force of the gale. Because it had grown so fast, its roots were shallow, spread out just beneath the surface to catch the easy rainwater. With one massive crack, the poplar was uprooted and tossed into the ravine below. The juniper, however, simply crouched lower. Its branches were flexible, but its shock absorber was invisible. Its root system was twice as large as its trunk, anchored deep into the heart of the mountain. When the storm passed, the juniper was still there, unscratched. Stability is an internal downward growth. In a world obsessed with visibility and fast growth, many people build poplar lives, high titles, big followers and expensive cars, but with zero depth in their actual skill or character. They have shallow roots. When the storm of a scandal, a lawsuit or a total industry shift hits, they vanish instantly because they had nothing holding them to the ground. Your survival bottom line is your depth. If you are the absolute best at one difficult, essential thing, no wind in the world can blow you away. Don't worry about how tall you are compared to others. Worry about how deep your roots go into the rock of reality. In the heart of a canyon prone to violent tremors, 2 master engineers were tasked with building bridges to connect 2 vital trading hubs. The first engineer, a man of efficiency named Victor, designed a bridge that was a marvel of modern minimalism. Why use 10 cables when 5 can hold the weight, he argued. Every extra pound of steel is a waste of the king's coin and a drag on the structure's speed. He calculated the exact breaking point of his cables and added a tiny margin for safety. It was sleek, cost-effective, and looked perfect. For 3 years, Victor was hailed as a genius of lean engineering. He had cut the fat out of the system. The second engineer, a quiet woman named Sarah, built a bridge that looked bulky and over-engineered. Instead of 5 thick cables, she used 50 smaller ones bundled together. She also built secondary support pillars that didn't even touch the bridge deck during normal weather. "It's redundant," the merchants complained. "You've spent twice the budget on parts that aren't even working." Sarah simply smiled and tightened the bolts on the useless secondary lines. She knew that in a world of redundancy, you don't build for the average day, you build for the 1-in-100-year disaster. Then came the Great Quake. The ground buckled like paper. One of Victor's main cables snapped under the sudden, extreme tension. Because there were only 5, the loss of one increased the load on the others by 25% instantly. A chain reaction followed, snap, 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 and the bridge vanished into the ravine. Sarah's bridge also took a hit. 10 of her cables snapped, and 1 secondary pillar cracked. But because she had redundant strength, the remaining 40 cables held the weight easily. The bridge didn't even sag. Redundancy is the shock absorber of the wise. In your career and your finances, efficiency is your enemy during a crisis. If you have only one way to reach your clients, one way to process payments, or one way to deliver your service, you are a lean bridge waiting for a quake. True security isn't about having just enough. It's about having the useless extra capacity that saves your life when the primary system fails. The city of Oakhaven was a paradise of technology and automation. Everything was handled by the system, from the climate control in the homes to the automated kitchens that prepared every meal. The citizens were advanced. They knew how to navigate complex software menus and how to manage digital assets. They were wealthy, polished, and felt entirely superior to the old-world laborers who lived in the outer rim. In Oakhaven, a man's value was measured by his social credit score and his ability to manage digital flows. They felt they had conquered the need for primitive skills. Then came the solar pulse. In a single afternoon, every circuit board in Oakhaven fried. The automated doors wouldn't open, the water pumps stopped, and the digital bank accounts vanished into thin air. The advanced citizens stood in their dark mansions staring at their dead screens, suddenly realizing they didn't know how to start a fire, how to purify a gallon of water, or how to fix a simple mechanical valve. Their status was a ghost that lived in a wire, and the wire was dead. They were helpless, paralyzed by their own sophistication. However, in the outer rim lived an old mechanic named Elias. He didn't have a high social score, and he didn't own digital gold. But he had a workshop filled with manual lathes, hand-forged hammers, and a deep, intuitive understanding of how things actually work. When the pulse hit, Elias didn't panic. He pulled out his manual tools and began building gravity-fed water filters and wood-burning stoves for his neighbors. Suddenly, the elite from the city were trekking through the mud to beg for his help. They offered him their useless jewelry and their titles, but Elias only cared for what was real. Your final trump card is the skill that remains when the lights go out. It is the unstoppable core of your value, the thing you can do with your own hands or your own specialized knowledge that no system can take away. Whether it is the ability to sell, the ability to build, or the ability to lead people in a crisis, this is your true shock absorber. When the environment collapses, the managers disappear, and the craftsmen become kings. Don't spend your whole life mastering a platform, spend it mastering a craft. The platform can be deleted. The craft is yours forever.